Hey guys, it's Josh from Wilcox Theater and Arts, and I'm here with another video on how to draw from observation. In the last video we talked about how to create value, or shades of gray, to depict a lifelike image. Today we're actually going to take that to a still life and try and replicate an image of a teapot on a piece of cloth. So I'm going to just walk you through that, and let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have this big piece of paper here in front of me on my drawing board. And one thing that's important to do when you start a drawing is to try and look at what it is you're drawing and map out on your piece of paper what that's going to look like. I did some drawings in my art classes where I just kind of started drawing. A good example of that, one time I was drawing a part of a bicycle. And I started on the handlebar, and I was drawing the handlebar far too big. And the handlebar ended up taking up all of my canvas. And so I just had this close study of a little handlebar that I did not intend to do. And so make sure you have in your head a concept of what it is that you want to replicate. And so for this teapot here, we're going to get the teapot and a little bit of the cloth. And we'll start out by mapping that out in pencil, what that's going to look like. So this right here is just a pencil that I picked up off my easel. This happens to be a 6B, so it's a very smudgy kind of pencil here. It's very important to get good proportions down before you add detail, because there's nothing worse than getting a very detailed portion of your drawing all done up, all set, and you take a step back and you realize, dang it, that's out of proportion. And you have to go in and erase all that work that you put in, where if you just were doing a light sketch, it'd be a lot easier to fix, to correct. You may notice that I'm trying to be very loose in my drawing with this pencil. And that is very helpful in building up that foundation, because you get to see a variety of lines that essentially when you go down and you start examining it, you basically get to choose from which lines you want to follow and which ones you want to erase. And it really helps capture the actual reality of what the image is. And so you'll see as I go through making small corrections, and those small corrections often result in darker lines. And that's my decision, essentially, either subconscious or conscious, that those lines are going to be the ones that I eventually go with in my drawing. And so I'm going to go about just mapping this out, and then I'll touch on some other things. Okay, I've done an outline that isn't the greatest. A couple critiques on myself. Whenever you guys are doing this, definitely don't draw as hard as I was. I kind of screwed myself over a little bit on drawing my sketch out a little too hard, and going back and erasing it has left a lot of smudges, a lot of things that I'll have to work with as I continue in this drawing. It's also not necessarily perfect in what I'm looking at. A better practice, if you are doing that, is to use some sort of measuring stick. I think I may have showed you guys once, but measuring the still life that you are drawing to your canvas, either with your thumb, with a pencil, with an actual measuring stick, which essentially is sighting down the thing that you're trying to draw. Say I'm trying to draw the teapot from top to bottom to see how that correlates with my canvas. I take my measuring stick, and I don't know if you can see this, but I'll try and describe it the best I can verbally. You take your measuring stick, my pencil in this instance, and I measure my thumb to the bottom of the teapot and my pencil to the top of it, or pitcher. I guess we actually had a conversation. It's probably a pitcher. And you see how long that is on here, and then you take it back and you measure it to how long you want to make it on your canvas, and you draw that out, and then you can then measure everything in in correlation to the top and bottom of the teapot to how it would look on your canvas and get a more accurate depiction than my little drawing here. But with that, we'll go in and we'll take this and start applying detail. All these lines that I made, one of the reasons it was probably not the best idea to draw as hard as I did when defining the permanent lines is I'll have to go in and erase those at the end of the drawing. Whenever you're drawing from observation, nothing you look at has a black line around it. And so I'll have to keep that in mind as I continue on. But anyway, let's go on to the next portion of this here. Okay, so let's go ahead and just jump in. I'm going to start with the top of the teapot here. Now, this metallic kind of an object is maybe a little bit more of a difficult thing to replicate when you're starting right off. And so if you are trying to replicate this and it's not looking the best, don't beat up on yourself too bad. When you're first trying to learn about value and how to apply it correctly, you might be better off starting with a very simple geometric shape. From a household perspective, maybe the closest thing to that might be like an apple. You know, an apple under a single light source can create kind of a sphere that is a relatively simple thing to replicate. If you have blocks, if you have kids that have blocks, draw a wooden block. But here we have the top, and we have a couple light sources coming through and a couple darks and lights. And I'll try and replicate that the best that I can. I have a little bit of a highlight there from a light source that I'm not drawing in quite yet. And it looks like another highlight right here, ever so vaguely, that I will try and be aware of as well. And then it looks like just some muddled metallic texture right here that has some darks and lights to it. So before I get started in just speeding this up and trying this out for myself and getting it figured out, one of the biggest things I can tell you to keep in mind is to draw things as you see them, not as you think you see them. This picture is a little easier for me because I'm drawing it at a face. It's more or less flat on my canvas, which generally is the way that your brain wants to see something or wants to draw something. And so especially if this was at an angle, you would have to really rein yourself in to draw it from an angle too, not to distort what you're seeing to be a flat face. But the same goes for these light fixtures, or these highlights. You might want to draw them lighter than they actually are. You might want to draw the darker portions darker than they actually are for the sake of simplicity. Our brain is really big on, especially when you're drawing, on trying to oversimplify something or create a symbol out of something. And when you get too caught up in that, you create something that isn't necessarily realistic. So as I go through and do this, I definitely won't be perfect at that. I'm still learning about this myself, but keep that in mind. So I've come quite a little ways into this drawing, and I am reminded over and over again how difficult it can be to try and add little details into your drawing. like this picture here, it has so many little cool carvings in it, like the one I'm doing up top here. And when you're doing something like this, you can get in there depending on what medium you're using. Say I'm doing this, say I'm doing a pen drawing, and I'm doing a different form of shading. You could try and get in there, and you could try and really iron out all these little details and make it look super cool and get all those details in. But with this charcoal, I'm constantly having to do either like a stylized version up here. Well, I'm having to do two things. I'm having to do a stylized version of those details where you kind of get the essence of, or get the feeling of flourishes, and I'm having to also just take out a lot of the detail. I'm having to generalize it. And so when you're drawing whatever it is you're drawing, you kind of have to pick your fight sometimes when it comes to detail. So being aware of that can be important. Usually if I was drawing this drawing, I might consider at this point doing it in a couple sit-downs. And that can be really important advice. If you feel like you're drawing something and you're starting to get kind of burnt out and it's losing the charm of drawing something, I would advise taking a step back and coming back to it later. When you get rushed or you get irritated or you are making some mistakes, it's only going to get worse normally. It's probably good to take a breather, sleep on it, come back another day. So I'm not going to do it everywhere, but usually if I really am worried about those lines blending to the edge, often what I'll do is I'll create the shade that I want, the shade of gray, and I'll purposely smudge or draw over the edge, and I'll go in with an eraser and cut down to where the shape actually ends. So there on that teapot handle, no longer have a line. Now of course I still have, you can see especially around the right side there, the handle, I have a lot of lines, black lines, especially around the details and things that are left behind, and I can try and patch those up just by smudging them and going in and erasing them the best I can. But for today's video, I think this is going to be our picture. I think I'll call it. Okay, so there we have our teapot. It is nowhere near perfect, but I think we talked about some good principles here, and you got hopefully a feeling of how value is replicated on paper during the course of that video. I'd love to see some of the things that you guys come up with as you're taking this course. Feel free to post some of your drawings onto our Facebook videos. I'd love to see what you guys are doing. Thanks for watching the video, and have fun drawing. See you guys.